Howdy, folks. I'm Kel Kellogg, and it's time for This Week in Fishing. We have a jam-packed show today to put you in the know for fishing success this weekend. We've got a bunch of guests. We've got reports. We've got tactical tips. Kevin Brock is going to be joining us, and he's going to be talking Sacramento River stripers and Lake Oroville kings. Captain Chris Smith will join us. He's going to give us a breakdown on San Francisco Bay halibut fishing. He'll be talking about lingcod and a whole bunch more. Don Paganelli's going to be here. He's going to be telling us all about the Foothill bass fishing scene. And we're going to wrap up our guests with Captain Brian Ricucci talking trophy Norcal trout fishing. My desk is covered in gear. I'm going to share a bunch of hot tips and information with you that's going to put you on the track for on the water success. So grab your socks. Here we go. This Week in Fishing is underway.
So we're late April, early May here, coming up on Striper Report. We're up here at Butte City. Fishing has been wide open, and I mean wide open. We limited everybody out, and we've gotten some really, really nice fish every day. We've been up here 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks now. The Feather River's still fishing pretty good, but the fish are moving down. The water's heated up, and the water's dropping. So for the next couple weeks, start working your way down. Work your way down to Colusa. It's up in there at the state park. They got a brand new ramp. Grab some stuff at Kittles. Work your way down from Kittles down to Tisdale. That's going to be the prime spot in the next couple weeks. This is going to fish maybe for the next 2-3 days, and that's it. And then I'm going to move my way down. But again, we're up here at Butte City. Fishing has been fantastic. What an awesome striper year it's been already, and it's going to keep going. So check us out at fishkevinbrock.com, of course, for the reports. Check Cal out, and he'll throw his information in there at the end and at the bottom of the screen, so you can check that out for reports and get online and check out where the fish are. So awesome. Thanks, Cal. All right, Kevin Brock here again. We were just talking about stripers. We're on the river, but what's coming up next in the next couple of weeks, into the next month, is Lake Oroville king salmon. DWR has promised to continue to plant these salmon, and they're getting up to 5 pounds. So they're already catching some nice fish over there. So trolling out there, go out of Bidwell, troll with little dodgers, little hoochies. There's lots of fish to be caught 50, 60 feet deep, and we'll be going and talking about that more. We'll be there here in about 3 weeks when striper season ends. But if you want to do some lake fishing and get out there, either get out with me and learn how to troll it with downriggers, and or just get some information, we'll let you know. But anyway, Lake Oroville is the next hot thing coming up. So in about 3 weeks.
Coming up next, we're going to be talking about halibut, stripers, lingcod, and more. Our next guest on This Week in Fishing needs no introduction, at least no introduction among the Northern California saltwater fishing community. I'm talking about Captain Chris Smith of Pacific Dream Sport Fishing. Of course, his son, Jonathan Smith. He's the skipper of the Happy Hooker. They are a 2-man team down there in Berkeley, California. And Chris is here to break it down for us. How are you doing out there today, Chris?
Hey, Cal. Well, actually, we're tied to the dock doing maintenance. How you doing?
I know you're doing maintenance. I'm doing fine, and I've been talking to you a couple times this week. I know you're down in the bottom cranking on bolts and screws and all that kind of stuff, waiting for some live bait. But tell us, let's start off. Tell us about the trolling bite. How has it been for you and Jonathan? What's been going on out there in the bay? Have you been catching some fish?
Yeah, we have. The fishing in the bay has been really successful. It's a little bit better for skiff fishermen, especially if you can sneak up on the fish, because the fish have been in really shallow water. I mean, I'm talking about back 5, 6, 7, 8 feet of water, 10, 11 feet of water. The Happy Hooker draws 6 feet, and this thing draws 7.5 feet of water. It's, wow. It makes a lot of noise. So once we get outside of like 12, 13 feet of water, boy, we can do some damage with this boat.
Gotcha. So, I see different kind of scores. What kind of scores is the guy is putting up right now? If you go on a trolling trip, even though you guys can't get into super shallow water, we scoring a fish per rod, or what are we looking at?
I'd say that been all across the board, just under a fish a rod to a fish a rod on up to just over 2 fish a rod, depending on the size of the load of the anglers that you have on board that day. It's been pretty productive, and a lot of the skiff fishermen too have been just picking up their limits for those a 3, 4, 5 person passenger loads.
So you know me, my passion is catching those big lingcod, and I'm not going to be able to join you this week, but I know you're taking the Pacific Dream on its maiden voyage out to the Farallon Islands. What's your prediction? What are you going to tell us about next week after this trip is in the books? What's going to happen?
I'm predicting a lot of blood and carnage.
Me too.
I can't tell you how. Yeah, and you know what? The weather, I looked at it yesterday. It was forecast to be flat calm. Of course, it's a forecast, so it's always subject to change. But I think we're going to have fair weather that day, and I'm expecting a good bite.
I think you're exactly right. It hasn't been fished very much in a while. And if you haven't been out on a lingcod trip, using the techniques we're using now, the braided line, the trap rigs, the big baits, game changer. Wouldn't you agree?
I would definitely agree. And you know what? We catch a lot of our own herring. We have the bait already available on board. And, we sell these little trap rigs on board already. So guys, if they've never done it before, they just use our equipment, and they get dialed in real quick. We carry 2 deckhands on this boat, so,
right.
And myself, so you constantly have 3 people working the deck.
Right on. Well, if the folks have any thoughts about what the potential is, they can look at the upper right-hand shot on the screen here. That's you and I. You know the picture on the Happy Hooker a couple years ago. Big old 20-some pound ling I got, and you're holding him on the gaff. Those trap rigs are magic. Final question for you, Chris, before I get some contact info from you. We know that the halibut bite's going to explode in the bay once live bait's available, and I know you probably don't have an exact date. Are we getting closer to having live bait?
You know what? The prospects are really good. I think that the water's been receding, and I know that the bait is starting to show up in the Central Bay. I spoke with the guy from the bait operation, and he thinks he's going to have it really soon for everybody. So
very cool.
Fingers crossed, and I could tell you this: it's probably a good thing that we haven't had live bait, because we'd really be putting a dent in the halibut population with it.
Yeah. You guys are going to mop them up. Well, how do they get a hold of you, Chris? I got your number on the screen here, but you tell us, how does somebody get a hold of you and get out on the Hooker or the Pacific Dream and go catch some halibut or some bottom fish?
Okay, they can book online if they like. It's really easy. It's just happyhookersportfishing.com. Mm-hmm. You can see a list of the trips if you just click on it in the upper right-hand corner. If one of our trips says call, then just make a phone call. Otherwise, they could just book online, put your information in, and pick the boat, and then you're good to go. Otherwise, if you want to book a trip on the Happy Hooker, it's 510-223-5388. Or the other boat is 510. You know what? Here, got it right here. 510 for the Pacific Dream, 993-4414. That'll get you on the boat.
Awesome. And if anybody wants to jump on that trip on Friday, Wes Ward of the Fish Sniffer will be there. He's going to have a bunch of prize rods and stuff. And he is a ringer in the lingcod fishing. Every time I go with him, he beats me. He always brings bass tackle. I don't know what he's thinking, but he gets some big lings on that stuff. So anyway, thanks for joining us, Chris. We'll talk to you again next week, and go put a whooping on those lingcod, man.
I certainly will. Thanks a lot for having me, Cal.
You betcha. Anytime. Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Okay, goodbye.
All right, guys. You heard it from one of the best in the business. Lingcod, look out. Chris is going out to the islands. Hopefully, we're going to have live bait available at Fisherman's Wharf very shortly. That's going to be a real change in the fishing inside the bay. The productivity is going to go through the roof. And we're going to take a break right now. And when we get back, I am going to share with you some secrets for catching halibut on the drift with live bait. Now, you wouldn't think there's any secrets. It's a live bait, but there are absolutely some secrets. I don't outfish everybody every day, but working with the Smiths, working with Jonathan Smith, James Smith on the Keldon, Deckhand Greg on the Happy Hooker, who is a commercial halibut fisherman. I feel like I got my gear and my approach pretty dialed in, and I'm going to share some of those secrets with you so you can take it from maybe getting a fish per rod to maybe getting 3 or 5. My big day last year, I had 11 keepers in one day. So, and I got no secrets. I'm going to tell you what I do, and you can do the same thing. So catch us after the break. I'm not afraid to admit it. For a long time, I struggled to catch halibut. But then I started to get a little bit luckier. I started to catch, an average amount of halibut, but that wasn't enough for me. I was determined to get dialed in on halibut. And I've interviewed a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of deckhands, a lot of successful anglers. And I feel like my gear is as dialed in as anybody's, or maybe it's just my style of fishing these days. But let me share with you what I do when we've got live bait and we're drifting for halibut in the bay from a charter boat or a private boat. Mostly I fish on charter boats. So this is how I do it. This is how I get it done. Here's a little piece of my famous pink pool floaty. That's where I put my leaders. And yes, they have leaders available on the boats and they're fantastic. Having said that, I like to tie my own stuff. And I'm going to tell you why. Let me unfurl one of these leaders. And I'll just show you the basics of what a halibut leader looks like. And I'll kind of go through the different parts of the leader. So, and this one I had left over from last season. So it's probably kind of got some memory involved here. But here we go. There we go. Okay. Now, first things first. Everything, when you're live bait fishing, everything works off of the three-way swivel. If you've done any charter boat fishing in the Bay Area for rockfish or live bait potluck in the Bay, you know all about three-way swivels. Everything works off of those. This eye right here, that's where the line from your rod attaches. And when I go out halibut fishing, I take 2 rods. I like to take a black bass weight rod, and I like to take a heavier rod. The heavier rod, I like something I can use 8 to 12 ounces of weight if I need to, maybe even a pound, depending on where we're fishing. The light rod, don't use that as much. I use 65-pound braid on the heavy rod. 50 will work. On the black bass rod, I like fairly stout, fast action black bass rod, like a swim bait rod or something like that. I typically spool that up with 30-pound test braids. So take my braided line, connect it to that open end on the 3-way. This short dropper right here, it's got a snap on it. That's where you're going to put your weight. So that's about 10 inches to a foot long. That's where you put your weight. I used to tie these droppers with lighter line than the maiden leader. Not anymore. Pretty standard 20-pound test on the dropper these days, and I don't vary that much. Then the third eye is where the leader attaches. Palomar knot, Palomar knot, Palomar knot with the braid coming down, okay? Now down here at the business end of the leader, and this is about 36 to 40 inches long. I tend to go with a shorter leader on a charter boat simply because you're going to get less tangles with a shorter leader, and there's really no downside in the number of strikes you get. So keep it 36 inches. On the business end, I have, and this is key, one of the keys, I have a very light wire, either a live bait hook or an octopus hook. I prefer the live bait style, but that is a small, very fine wire, high quality hook. This is where it pays to shell out the cash for the owners, the Gamakatsus. You want a light wire hook, but you want a strong hook. I've got that attached, and I don't know if you can see that. Oh yeah, you can see that. Perfection loop knot. And what that does is that allows a lot of freedom of movement to the bait. Now, let me show you an old style live bait hook. This is what we used in the old days, and I'll hold it up next to the hook I use now. These heavy body hooks, see how heavy the wire is in that hook right there? You know, we're not fishing for tuna. We're not looking to slug it out with these fish. I always tell people, the best place to fight a halibut is in the net. We want to eat these for dinner. So you want to float them up to the surface. You fight them, they fight you. Keep the rod tip loaded, keep the reel moving, slide them right up to the boat, and listen to the deckhand's instructions. But look, this is the hook I'm using. Look at how much finer wire this hook is. Which hook is going to do more damage to the bait? This big, giant, heavy one. What you want is maximum liveliness of your bait. Okay, you want to pick out a shiny, beautiful, lively bait, an anchovy, and you want to pin that through his lower jaw, out through his nose, not super deep. You don't want to knock his scales off. You want to be minimally invasive. Try to say that a couple times. And you're just going to be a lot further along. Final tips. Okay. Well, let's talk about the line. And then we'll get into my final tip. What I've found, back in the day, bay's muddy. Shouldn't matter. Back in the day, standard was 30-pound mono on your leader. Okay? Then this newfangled fluorocarbon line that fish can't really see came out, and everybody was like, oh, you don't need that in the bay. It's muddy out there. Well, we started using fluorocarbon in 25, 30-pound tests, and we caught a lot more halibut. Must be something to this fluorocarbon. What I've started doing now is I'm downsizing. I downsize. I use nothing but Yozuri fluorocarbon for my leader. I use 15-pound test as standard. Sometimes I'll drop down to 12. This season I might drop down to 10-pound test. You got to keep your drag set loose. You got to retie after every fish. But I'll tell you what, that's my number one secret. That's why I catch more halibut than most of the people most days. I'm using very light gear, very in terms of leader material, and a light drag, and my bait is really lively. So I think that's a big key. 15-pound fluorocarbon to start. Don't be afraid to go down to 12. If you're not feeling it with that, maybe stick with 20, but leave that 30, 25-pound test, that stiff stuff, leave that at home. 15 is the way to go. If you doubt me, talk to Greg Brown on the Happy Hooker. He agrees with me. He takes 3-ways apart all the time, and he replaces people's gear with 15-pound fluorocarbon, and they put a whooping on those fish. Final tip. When you start out doing this type of fishing, if you haven't done it before, you want to use your heavy rod. You want to fish out of the rod holder. Just put your weight down, 8 ounces, whatever they're using, put it down till it just ticks the bottom. Put your rod in the holder. When the rod loads up, you got a halibut on the end of your line. Okay? What I like to do is, particularly in the afternoon, when the wind is starting to go and I say that's when we have a drift. The wind is pushing the boat along, and I don't know why this works. Instead of putting a 8 or 12 ounce sinker on there, I take a torpedo weight. I take a 1 ounce weight. Okay, pin it on there. I put it on that black bass rod, and I get on the down drift side so I can let my line way out there. Let it way out there. So I'm typically 150 feet or so. I never get in a snag. I can walk around behind guys. My bait's way over there, 100 feet away, 150 feet away. I don't engage the reel. I stand there with the rod tip up. I put my thumb on the reel. Okay. So it's drifting along. At the first indication of any kind of bite whatsoever, I go free spool. I control the line coming out, but I let it just walk out. And what's happening is that rig is laying back there with the fish, and the fish is doing whatever he's doing with the anchovy. He's getting it further and further and further in his mouth. And then when I think he's had it long enough, I engage the reel, and I just hold the rod tip up, and the boat's drifting away, and pretty soon the rod just starts to load against the fish. And with that braided line, I give him a little pop to set the hook. I got virtually no weight on there, 1 ounce. And I just gently start reeling the fish in. Typically, doesn't matter how big they are, they'll swim right up to the boat until I've only got out 20 or 30 feet of line. Then they'll fight a little bit. By that time, deckhands standing aside me with the net. I float the fish up, usually to the back corner of the boat. In the net he goes. I remember one trip in particular last summer. We were fishing at Crissy Field. Bite was a little slow. Guys weren't catching a lot with the standard gear. 6 keepers in a row off the back corner of the happy hooker using that technique. So results speak for themselves. Don't be afraid to do that, but you got to have confidence. You got to have a little bit of skill because you won't be tangling all your neighbors. They will hate you. Don't do that. Anyhow, get out there and get after those halibut. It's going to be a great season. Live bait's right around the corner. Get your gear dialed in. Put some fish in the freezer. We'll be right back to talk Foothill Bassin with master angler Don Paganelli. It's time to talk bass fishing, and I have one of the best bass guides in Northern California on the line. I have Don Paganelli of Don Paganelli's Bass Fishing Experience. Don's been spending a lot of time out on Folsom Lake, and he's got some real fresh information for us. How are you doing, Don?
I'm doing great, Cal. Good to talk to you.
Awesome, man. So we were talking last night, and you've been catching spots out there at Folsom. That's centerpiece of the menu. But you've been catching some really nice largemouth bass, and I got some pictures of them here. Tell us a little bit about the largemouths and the bite in general.
Well, Folsom Lake is what I call starts up in April. And when April rolls around, I tell people that's the time to start going to Folsom. Those fish are starting to wake up and
get up there and feed pretty heavy. And we're starting to find a lot of these largemouth that are moving in and already establishing beds.
So we're starting to find some nice largemouth towards the back of some of these coves, getting up in some of this high grass, and they're kind of loving it up there right now.
Well,
so we're using, a number of techniques, either Senkos or tubes and that kind of thing, to target some of these bass that are moving up on beds.
And they're feeding on crawdads out there. That's what you mentioned last night when we chatted a little bit. They're putting a chomp on the crawdads.
Yes, they are.
Awesome.
Yes, they are. I mean, the tubes have been a really good bait for that. As soon as that sun comes up and starts to warm up those banks a little bit, those crawdads are coming out, and we're finding fish, in the top, right up on the beach at that point in time where they're really feeding on crawdads. And that tube really works well for imitating that crawdad, that green pumpkin red flake tube on an 8-ounce dart head.
Okay.
Just working it really slow down the bank. Either that or throwing that little 4-inch
Senko.
Uh-huh.
That'll work really well, too.
That's your trademark bait. You showed me that years ago, and that's dynamite. I'm looking at this fella. He's got the camo jacket on. You put this picture on your Facebook page just last night. He's up in a cove holding a largemouth, and man, Folsom just looks prime, though. The water's up in the grass. I mean, it's just gorgeous out there.
Oh, yeah. It's only got like 10 more feet to go before it's full. So They're going to hold it back probably as much as they can because they can fill it real quick. But they've got a lot of snow belt coming down, and that top 3 or 4 feet of water is going to feel pretty warm, but it's going to be really cold below that.
Because that water is really moving through there pretty quick.
Right.
And that's one of the things about Folsom Lake that makes it different than most lakes is that water exchange that it has.
But and that's the spotted bass bite is really good up there too.
Well, I see some of the pictures of your spots. Just nice, chunky, healthy fish. Now, we got a little cold front going through today. Is that going to affect the fishing? What's the outlook for the next week?
Well, these little cold fronts that move in and out this time of year when these fish are moving up to spawn, it affects them just a little bit, but they're so eager to get up there and spawn. They really got that on their mind, and so they're going to move up and down with these little fronts, but they get right back into it pretty quick as soon as these fronts pass by. So, you just have to be aware of a lot of the wind, especially the wind that we had overnight and today. But other than that, a lot of these lakes are doing really good. Barry S has been doing really good. We've been just catching
Tons of fish up there. A lot of really nice largemouth, and starting to find some really nice smallmouth up there.
Awesome.
Along with the spots, but that lake has made a real good resurgence on the smallmouth front. We caught some beautiful smallmouth in the last few years up there, so that's been really nice. And then Comanche's coming on real strong. And there's always Clear Lake. Clear Lake is just one of those lakes that you never know when that next cast is going to be a double-digit fish.
Right.
So all these lakes are coming on right now.
Very good. It is the nirvana time of the year for bass fishermen. Well, Don, I'm going to let you go. I know you have a real day job as well, and that's where you're at right now. If these folks want to get out on the boat with you and learn some tips and tactics on how to catch bass in Northern California, how can they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me through my website
site at guidebass.net, or they can give me a call at 916-502-FISH.
Hey, thanks a lot, Don. We'll catch you next week with some more information about the NorCal bass scene. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cal. Talk to you later.
All right, sir. Well, I've had the opportunity to fish with Don a number of times, and I can tell you he is a true gentleman. He's a lot of fun to fish with, and man, we've had some great times. One of these days on the show, I'm going to tell you about the big old catfish he caught at Lake Comanche, and I decided to put it in the, I guess I'm telling the story right now, I decided to put it in the live well, and it got revived, and I reached in there to get it for a photo a few hours later, and it clamped on my hand. I screamed. Anyway, we've had a lot of good times chasing bass and stripers and stuff like that. Anyhow, when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about my favorite spring bass baits. We're going to talk about some of the baits that Don likes to throw, some of the baits I like to throw. I'm no expert, but I do catch my share of bass. And spring, if you're not a bass guy, but you still want to enjoy catching some bass, spring is a great time. They're up, they're shallow, they're sassy, they're ready for action. So anyway, we'll be right back, and we'll talk bass technique. Okay, let's talk spring bass fishing. Now, there's a variety of baits will work in the spring, and I love spring bass fishing. I am not a huge bass angler, but I'll tell you what, when those fish are up on the shore, like Don Paganelli said, they're up there in 0 to 15 feet of water. They're sassy, they're aggressive, they're ready to go. And this pretty much applies to any of the foothill lakes. Folsom, Comanche, Don Pedro, on and on and on and on. They're all kind of on the same page. Water temperature dictates everything in the spring, but the bottom line is the largemouths, the smallmouths, the spots, they all want to spawn. And that's why they're up in the shallows. Water levels are up, and there's a lot of structure to cast at, and it's just a great time of the year. So let's start out with a really simple to fish reaction bait. I'd use this first thing in the morning before the sun's on the water, maybe just for the first hour or so, and I'm talking about the Rapala floating minnow. Just a standard floating minnow. Love this finish. Silver and black works, rainbow works, the clown patterns work. Whatever you got confidence in, whatever you want to fish, really. What do you do with this bait? Cast it to the shore. Cast it out. Let it set down. Let it set in the surface. And let those rings completely go away. Don't do anything. Tighten down on the line just a little bit. And then just give it the subtlest twitch and stop. And be ready. Because a lot of times, right then, kaboom, a big old explosion, fish on. If that doesn't work, twitch it a little more robustly a couple times and let it pop back up to the surface. Now, still no strike, go ahead, reel it down under the surface, give it a couple good, aggressive twitches, and let it float back up again. No bites at that point. You can just straight reel it in. You can reel it in and punctuate it with some hard twitches and jerks. That's why they call it a jerk bait. But usually the bite is going to come with those first couple twitches, and it's going to be fairly violent, and it's going to be really exciting. Spots, largemouths, smallmouths will hit that. Smallmouths in particular find that minnow plug, that floating minnow, darn hard to resist when the sun isn't on the water. And the same pattern will work in the evening. You find yourself out in the lake, it's starting, the sun's getting down, you're getting them shadows, that will work. So anyway, morning is past. It's time to break out the soft plastics. What do you do? Everybody knows about the robo worm, pin one on the hook, Texas style, drag it along the bottom. You're going to catch some fish on it. Now, what Don shared, he said the fish are feeding heavily on crawfish out there. So let's start out with my number one crawfish imitation. It doesn't matter what plastic you use, it's how you rig it and what you do with it. This is just pretty much a standard kind of crawfish looking soft plastic body. It has a football head in it. And that jig head is really adept at dragging along the bottom, hopping along the bottom. And you can see, just look at the silhouette on that. That is just crawdad all day long. What would I do with this? I wouldn't work it super slow. Cast to the shore, hop it up, swim it along, hop it up, swim it along. That's really what you're gonna want to do with it. And those pinchers, those legs moving, it just gives them the impression of a crawfish trying to get away. And usually on a bait like this, it's a pressure bite. You're working the bait and all of a sudden it feels like, I snagged a weed. Well, it's not a weed. Reel down and set the hook because a fish has got it in his mouth. They think it's a crawdad. They're going to grab it and they're going to give it the old crush because they think it's a crawfish. So he's just going to stand there and hold on to it. When you pull on it, you're just going to feel, you're going to feel some resistance. Set the hook. So right there, drag that, cast ashore, drag it into some, fairly deep water, let it kind of swim its way down. And that's dynamite right there. That should be working. Another great bait, very versatile bait. Don loves fishing this a lot. 1/8 ounce darter head with a standard curly tail grub. You can go with the earth tones, the smoke and flake like I got here. This is a great bait because it can imitate a minnow and it can imitate a crawfish. You want to imitate a crawfish, drag it along the bottom a little more, let it drop and fall, drop and fall. The bite's going to be the same. It's going to be a pressure bite, and that works great. You can also cast this at a target. You can cast it parallel to the shoreline, and you can just slow roll it swim bait style. This is really your micro ultralight swim bait. It's got the darter head on it, so that's an 1/8 ounce darter. If the water's a little deeper or whatever, you can upsize that to a 1/4. But an 1/8 ounce, man, you get that just really super, just beautiful fall, and they're suckers for this bait. So that's just a deadly bait. That's a deadly bait all year long, but in the spring, bass are, they're looking to feed. Just cast it out. You can't really go wrong with that bait. Just fish it moderately slow and let that tail do the rest. So there you go. Anyway, love those grubs. The final bait. Things slow down. If I absolutely had to catch a bass right now, this is what I'd be using. I'd be using a 4-inch. This is a 5-inch version, but I'm talking about the Wacky Rig Cinco. It looks absolutely ridiculous. It's pinned on a hook. The hook totally shows. But what you want to do with this, pin it on just like that. Or if there's a little bit of cover, you can actually take it like this and go all the way through it. So I'm coming all the way through the bait with it on there like that. Take that out like that, and then just bring this back around here and skin hook it. if there's some grass or whatever. So now it's semi-weedless, but it's the same idea. What do you do with this bait? Cast it out there, and just let it fall on a semi-tight line. And your bite, you might get a couple tugs. Your line might just start swimming off to one side. Once it touches down, jerk it up off the bottom a couple times, let it fall. You're done. Reel it in, cast again. Reel it in, cast again. It fishes like live bait. It's an amazing bait. It is the perfect bait for the novice bass fisherman, or really any bass fisherman. It catches big fish. It catches small fish. It catches deep fish, shallow fish, midday fish, nighttime fish. Doesn't matter. Wacky rig Cinco, man. That is just a killer bait. So there are 4 options for you when you're fishing your spring bass. 3 of those, all the subsurface stuff, I would fish on a fluorocarbon line. The minnow, standard mono, fluorocarbon sinks. I would want, for reservoir fishing, I would want these plastics rigged on 10-pound test line. That's pretty much it. Can't go wrong. This guy right here, I would fish him on 8 or 10-pound test, copolymer, standard mono, you name it, it'll work. You just don't want something that is going to sink like the fluorocarbon's going to sink. That doesn't hurt you with the subsurface stuff. So anyway, more bass fishing tips to come, and that's about all I got to say. Get out there after those spring bass. Even if you're a trout guy, it's a fun time of the year to fish, and who doesn't like action? Who doesn't like fish that come up and jump when you hook them? So good stuff, man. When we come back, we'll be on the hunt for trophy trout with Captain Brian Ricucci. Hey folks, here on the phone I have one of the top trout skippers in Northern California, Captain Brian Ricucci. Brian's got some exciting information. He's out on Lake Elmanor every day, and that bite is busting loose big time with the warmer temperatures. How are you today, Brian?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. Cal, how's things in the studio?
Doing well, man. Doing well. I'm getting things dialed in here still, but things are coming along nicely. I was reading your fishing report. It sounds like things are getting really exciting, even more exciting than when I was up at Elmanor last week. Tell us a little bit about that bite.
Yeah, it's been crazy. We've gone from winter to almost spring, but still like winter, and now almost to like a late spring summer attitude with the warmer temperatures. The water temperature literally has shot up almost 10 degrees in 1 week's time.
Wow.
And of course that fades a little bit, but we're talking from 45 to 55 degrees, and some of the later days with no wind, we're seeing that water temperature get as high as 60, but of course that's just right on the surface. That is kicking things into high gear, and this time of year and these kind of conditions mean one thing at Elmanor, and that is some pretty massive aquatic bug hatches. And when those bugs start popping, those trout go crazy.
So I fished the end of those bug hatches with you a number of times now. How are you getting the fish at this time? Are you slow trolling the threaded worms? Are you in deep water? What's the situation if we were going to go up there right now?
Well, a little bit of everything will work right now. A little bit of fast, a little bit of slow. But when you fished with me in years past, we were more in tune to some of the bigger aquatic bugs that won't come out until a little bit later this year.
Okay.
In another month or so, and we'll start to see some of those big stone flies and a few of the early hex flies start to pop and that kind of thing. Right now, we're just seeing massive amounts of midges hatching. And so there's, thousands of acres of water out there that are conducive to holding those midge beds where they hatch from.
Right.
And different areas throughout the day, throughout the morning, heck, throughout the hour, sometimes will erupt with new hatches and will draw fish into. And it's not a matter of structure or anything like that. It's wide open water, but those bugs popping off the bottom and coming to the surface in one particular area, say an acre or two at a time, My go-to thing this time of year is the high-speed stuff, because what that allows us to do is cover a whole lot of water and get from bug hatch to bug hatch to bug hatch throughout the morning quite a bit faster than if we were slow trolling stuff.
Awesome. Now, what's biting primarily? I know I read your report. I know you're getting all three species up there. Rainbows are the dominant fish. How big are they running? What's your average fish and what's your big this week?
You know, our average fish is high 2s to 3 pounds. We're getting some few smaller ones. We're getting certainly some bigger ones. We're seeing rainbows 4s, 5s. Probably the biggest rainbow we've pulled on the boat this week was just short of 6 pounds. In fact, there's if you're looking at a little over a 5.5 pounder at the top of that current report. If you read that off the website,
I saw that fish. I didn't know how much it weighed, but it was certainly a gorgeous trout, and we'll have that picture up here on the screen when I publish this video, so everybody will get a chance to see that. Boy, that's one of the things that gets me fired up about Elminor is those big rainbows.
That fish, yeah, that's just a slug. I mean, they're just almost obese, and we catch and release a lot of fish, but you know, it's okay to keep some of those rainbows for sure, and especially the rainbows. The meat on them is absolutely fantastic right now. It's bright red, it's firm on some of the ones. We kept just a few on yesterday's trip and released everything else. But I mean, we're seeing over 20 fish a day on these morning trips. And it's a little bit all over the place. Sometimes it's right off the bat in the morning, just depends on the conditions. Sometimes you'll get a few fish and then it'll start erupting after an hour or so. Mm-hmm. But usually the bite's kind of going for the better part of the day. So their fish are fairly active. And like I said, just like us, we're on the move with the high-speed trolling stuff. Those fish are constantly on the move looking for the next hot spot where those bugs are going to be popping. But yeah, if you take a look at that report, I mean, you see kind of a pretty good cross section there on some of the fish that we are catching. Those salmon are just spectacular.
Whoa!
I haven't had any of them in a couple of days now, but they're out there, and man, they are just beasts. The other thing that's nice now that we're out in the open water is we're fishing these things. I mean, if it sounds, I get excited about this, and this is my 22nd year doing this, but wow. I'm like a kid in a candy store when rods are bouncing out there. We're fishing the lightest gear on the boat right now, and nice. Despite their size, right now with this high-protein bug food, some of these rainbows especially, this is the hottest time of year for them as far as their attitudes.
Right.
And so we've got fish flying out of the water 3-4 feet in the air behind the boat, almost on hookup. We've got them jumping part way to the boat, digging down, trying to get underneath the boat. I mean, the battles have just been unbelievable on the backside of the boat right now.
Well, when I was up on the lake last week and you and I were texting on our phones and you were out on a big fish bite, but when I caught that 4-pound rainbow, I mean, I've caught thousands of trout and thousands of rainbows probably. That is the hardest fighting trout I've ever caught. He literally jumped 10 times. I mean, about 4-pound trout, and you're 100% on the mark about the meat. When I filleted the fish I brought home, they look like ocean salmon. I mean, it was unbelievable. I'll throw a picture of that up here. The meat was blood red and so good to eat. So if you want to battle some fish and take some fish home for the table, now is a good time to get out on Elminor. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And those rainbows are also a pretty good resource if you're looking to harvest some fish, because they are the most widely planted. Matter of fact, we're just a few days away from the Elminor Fishing Association releasing 50,000 more rainbows out of our pen-fed program over on the east side of the lake. So that's going to be some good stock in years to come for us.
Well, you know, I've talked to biologists about that, and my question was, why don't we see rainbows that are as big as the browns in a lot of lakes? And what I've been told is that the life expectancy of a brown trout is about 3 times that of a rainbow. So the answer I got was, well, rainbows don't live that long. So they're the fish you want to harvest. If you're going to harvest a fish for the table, the rainbows and the kings are the ones. The browns you want to put back. A brown trout will live for 20 years, and that just isn't the case with a rainbow, apparently.
But no, that's exactly right. And then there's even a wide variation when you get within the different rainbow species. the Eagle Lake trout, not just found in Eagle Lake, but also planted elsewhere. And there's a number of them that have been planted over the years at Almanor. Their lifespan's even shorter than the average rainbow because their metabolism's so fast. But what that allows them to do is, as long as they have a food source, kind of fuel, if you will, for that high-speed metabolism, is they grow at a much more rapid pace, so it takes a planted fish less time to get up to a real quality sport-sized, fish for us to catch.
And it also makes them biters. They have to eat. They have to eat all the time. So, you'd translate some hookups. I can agree
with that.
So you had some great feedback from one of your customers this week. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll close. We'll talk a little bit about what the prospects are at Bucks Lake upcoming here.
Yeah, like I said, I've been doing this a long time. It's my 22nd year running light tackle trophy trout trips up here in the mountains, and I'm fortunate to be able to do it, honestly, with what we've got in the region we've got and some of these fisheries that are up here. But it's just added little bonus on the cake, if you will, when you get icing on the cake, I should say, when you get messages back from people. So I get a guy who's a longtime fisherman. He's a homeowner up there at the lake. He's got his own boat. He's out on the water. We wave and talk back and forth quite a lot between our two boats. But a couple of times a year, including right around his birthday, he always likes to come up and do a trip. And a lot of times it's him and his brothers and that sort of thing. But this year it turned out to be him and his son-in-law and his grandson and his friend of his grandson's. And we're talking 11-year-old young men here.
Oh, right.
And so we went out and had a pretty spectacular day catching these rainbows, hard fighting stuff. We didn't get them all to the boat because you're not going to get them all to the boat when they're fighting like they're fighting, So they kept a couple for dinner, and we headed in about noon with big smiles on everybody's faces and said our goodbyes, and I headed back down the lake to the harbor, and I get an email today from him that says, "Hey, Brian, thanks for making yesterday the best day ever fishing Lake Almanor. The fact that I was able to share that with my son-in-law and grandson made it absolutely priceless. Thanks for the memories, Eric."
That's awesome.
That's what it's all about,
Well,
making those memories.
Yeah. Well, I could say I've been trout fishing forever, and when you go out with Brian Ricucci, when you take a trip with him, it is kind of like going to trout fishing school. It's fun. Brian doesn't browbeat you or make you feel like a moron, which, I gotta say, some guides do. But I learn a lot when I'm out there, and I'm one of those guys that already knows how to fish, and that's just awesome feedback, Brian. That's great. So very good.
Yeah, it's a little more fuel to keep us going up here for sure.
Well, yeah, it just makes you feel good when you get somebody out on the water and they have a good time. I'm chomping at the bit. I want a big Mackinac at Bucks. What's the deal? Can I drive up there now and catch 10 or 15 of them, or is the road still closed?
Well, you could drive in there if you brought a snowcat or a snow machine.
Yeah.
I'm hearing 6 feet of snow still at the lake.
Wow.
Normally by this time of year, we've got some inclination from our local county road department, who knocks the road open from the Quincy side. We've got no such indication this year. I can tell you in years past, they typically try and have the road open, at least from the Quincy side. Now, this is not for people coming up from the Oroville side. That takes a bit longer. Mm-hmm. They typically try and have it open by Mother's Day because it's always been a place, the lodges up there have always catered to mothers on Mother's Day with brunches and that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
So, some of the resorts, Lakeshore, that I work out of, they've been open throughout the wintertime for the snow machine crowd anyway, so it's not like they're going to be firing up a resort from scratch. So I'm hoping that, by Mother's Day, we're going to be in there. I know there's some people on my calendar that are really hoping we're going to be in there because they've got some dates booked. So once we get in there, it's going to be typically on years where we have pretty severe winters, which this one was decent.
Yeah.
We usually have a pretty good bite on those big fish.
Awesome. Well, when it opens, I've never wet a line there, so in everything I've heard, it's a phenomenal fishery. So I'm going to hit it from the kayak this year, and I know you'll be out there guiding. If folks want to get a hold of you, and I'm going to post your number up here and your web link and all that, but how do they get a hold of Brian Ricucci and book a trip on Lake Elminor or one of the other great fisheries you hit like Eagle Lake or Bucks or Davis? How do they get a hold of you, Brian?
Sure. So probably the easiest thing for them to do, as I am pretty much on the water, on the boat every day, is hit up the website, which is BigDaddyFishing.com. Look around there. We've got the schedules. We've got documentation for all the different bodies of water and the time of years we fish them and that sort of thing. But there's a reservation form there online that they can submit. If they have some specific dates they're looking for, they can shoot me an email if they just have some questions, or give me a call. But just be wary that usually a call means you're leaving a message, and I'll get back to you as quick as I can.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I call you every week for a report, and you are a moving target because you're always out there. You're always up in the mountains, so cell phone reception's iffy at best. Anyhow, Brian, you are having a day off now. You enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to jump off the line here, but thanks for all the great information, and we will talk to you next week. Brian tell us that he is banging those big Elminor rainbows, pulling spoons and pulling them fast. So the question is, what spoons would I use if I were on Lake Elminor right now to get a big bite from those rainbows? And I'll tell you what, I got 4 choices, all right? Number 1, and I'm going to be trolling these anywhere from 2.5 to 4 miles an hour. Number 1, drum roll please, not a huge surprise. Magnum Speedy Shiner in a bait fish color. It's a pond smelt lake. They're looking for flash. They're looking for something that looks like a smelt. The Magnum Speedy Shiner. That's my number 1 choice. Number 2, not much different. The standard size Speedy Shiner. That's in the bloody cop car pattern. It could be chrome. It could be copper. Something that flashes. It's going to get their attention. You're going to pop them on that Speedy Shiner. And just for comparison's sake, there's the big boy, there's the little one. So both of them super effective. But you know me, I'm always thinking big fish. Bigger's better. So anyway, number 3, everybody should have these. The Magnum Humdinger, 1/2 ounce Humdinger, great fast trolling lure. Of course, it's in the Captain America. All the colors work. That one's hard to beat. That's my wife's favorite lure. It's a great bait fish imitation. It's got that big prominent eye on there. Great choice. And number four, this isn't even a trout spoon. This is the Silver Horde Kingfisher Light. This is an ocean salmon spoon. It comes with a big J hook on the back. I remove that, and I like to put on a treble, preferably a red treble. So Kingfisher Light. I've had some epic strikes on this one here at Elminor, and it just plain works. Anywhere the fish are feeding on shad, pond smelt, that chrome tape, chrome spoon, pull it fast, put it in front of the fish, it's going to work for you. So basically, if you go to Elminor, your small minnow plugs are going to work, your spoons are going to work. You're looking for something that you control quickly with, something you can cover a lot of ground with, find those fish, be aggressive, they're aggressive, and you're going to catch some epic rainbows. Well, there you have it, folks. There are a lot of options for the upcoming week, whether you want to fish for halibut, lingcod, black bass, stripers, trout. I mean, it's all happening. It's springtime. I want to thank you for joining me on This Week in Fishing. Please hit that subscribe button down there, and I'll be back at you next Thursday with another full show of fishing information, including reports, tactics, destinations. We cover it all here on This Week in Fishing. I'm Kel Kellogg, and I'm signing off.